had an experience like this when you had the opportunity to travel someplace beautiful in the world. Or maybe you felt that way about a concert you went to and your friends were like, yeah, I saw the concert when they made it a documentary on Netflix, so I understand what it was like. But you were like, you have no idea. You could feel the music, the crowd was epic, and there was like this electricity in the air. And even though you tried to capture it on video from your phone, it just wasn't the same. So you just ended up saying, you just have to go and see for yourself. Or maybe it was a time you had with your friends. It was the kind of night where you didn't do anything crazy, but the vibe was just right. You laughed until you hurt, but things got deep as well. Those nights are the ones you remember forever. But then you go home and your parents said, what'd you do tonight? And words just didn't make sense. Or they asked, what'd you guys talk about? And all you could think was, no matter what I say, it's not gonna make sense to you. You had to be there. During the Christmas season, it's almost impossible not to hear about the birth of Jesus. And yes, you'll hear plenty about Santa Claus and reindeer and snowmen and elves, but the foundational message of Christmas is about how God came to earth as a helpless baby. And even if you aren't a church person or you aren't really sure about what you believe about the whole story, the message of the birth of Jesus is kind of impossible to avoid this time of year. You can't go very long without seeing a nativity scene, a manger, angels, lights, all of it trying to explain how incredible the meaning of the season is. Maybe you've noticed church people get super into it. Maybe you've heard plenty of people trying to explain to you that because of the birth of Jesus, you can know how incredible God is. Because of Christmas, you can know how powerful God is. Because of this season, and because of God coming down to earth, you can know how loving God is. And you hear all the explanations, but all of the reasons. But for you, you just aren't sure you really get it. And to be honest, there are some really good reasons you might not get it. One reason you might not get it or believe it is because of the type of people who are telling you the story. Maybe you've heard about how life-changing the birth of Jesus is from people whose lives don't look very life-changed. Maybe the people who believe the story don't seem to treat other people all that well, and they're super judgmental towards others. And it makes you think, if believing the story doesn't change how you live, then why would I believe it? It doesn't make the story very credible. Or maybe you've heard the story of Jesus' birth explained and how it communicates how good God is. But you look around at the circumstances of your life and it didn't seem that God is very good because life is hard. Maybe it hasn't turned out the way that you hoped it would or the way you feel like you deserve. This has been such a difficult year for so many people all around the entire world. Look at how many people lost their jobs. Maybe people you know who lost their lives or lost loved ones. And it can be tough to believe in the explanation that there is a good, loving God in control of all of it. And maybe that is your story today. Life hasn't hit you hard, and listening to the explanation of God demonstrating his closeness and goodness to you by coming in the form of a baby just doesn't add up. No matter what you've heard before, whether you care or you don't, whether you believe or not, I'm asking you for the next 10 minutes to allow yourself to rethink all of this. And here's why. This isn't a story. This is history. These were real people with real lives and who had real problems and real fears. These were people who had doubts and questions about who God was and how God worked in the world. And the people in this story are people who were not expecting anything particularly special or unique to happen to them. They weren't expecting God to show up on this particular night in history, but he did. So, as you listen to this, think about yourself. Put yourself in the story. How would you have responded? What would you have thought? What would you have done? The story starts this way. because there was no guest room available for them. Let me ask you this. If you were the God of the universe and you wanted to show up on earth and announce your presence to the world for the first time, how would you do it? My guess is we would at least have shown up dressed. Make sure we weren't in the position to be hurt or humiliated. We don't even show up at our friend's house without a shower and looking nice. But when the God of the universe made his arrival, he picked to show up as a baby, naked, small, and helpless, and completely dependent upon others for his survival. That was how God showed up in the world. God himself experienced what it was like to be human, what it was like to be you. The Christmas story is a remarkable picture of what God is like. God wanted to put himself in your shoes, wrap himself in skin like you have, and experience all the feelings you felt. In this life, Jesus would experience betrayal. He would get frustrated. He would see one of his best friends die. He would know what it was like to be rejected by others. He would also know what it was like to have a close-knit group of friends. He would experience the joys of the world around him, and he knew how to throw a party. If you ever wonder if God knows you, or if God loves you, if God has ever wondered if God understands you, and if you have ever wondered if God knows what it's like to live on this planet, he certainly does. The Christmas story is proof. The gospel writer Luke goes on to say this. The shepherds were the lowest of the low when it came to social status. That's why they were outside in the fields. Shepherds were kept away from the normal people. They were too poor, too unshowered, too undignified for regular society. This is who God chooses to show up to. Go and find the person at your school no one wants to sit with or be around. That's who God would choose to eat lunch with if he showed up at your school. You can't explain a God like that. It's unexplainable that he loves all of us and has experienced exactly what it is to be like us. The reason I believe the Christmas story is true is because no one could have made this up. People would never make up a story about God showing up like this because no one would believe it. So when the angels deliver a message like this to a group of people like shepherds, they have to go and experience Jesus for themselves. If God has done this, if God is like this, if God has showed up to us, then they have to go. And so the shepherds looked at one another and said, let's go and see this thing that has happened. Let's experience God for ourselves. And they did, and it changed them forever. Now, I don't know how you feel about what you heard today. Maybe you believe it all. Maybe you don't believe any of it. Maybe you feel something. Maybe you feel nothing. No matter where you land, I want to encourage you to do something nobody would have expected in the first century, to follow the examples of the shepherds. Do what they did. Sometimes we need to simply go and see for ourselves. We can't let someone else's experience tell us what to believe. We need to experience it for ourselves. And how do you do that? How can you continue to experience Jesus in this season? Now, maybe this is your first time you feel like you're seeing for yourself. This is the first time you're hearing and believing for yourself. If that's you, continue that conversation with a small group leader. I want you to know and experience the love of Jesus. I want you to experience it for yourself, then think for yourself, then decide for yourself, if Jesus is who he says he is.